What if I told you that one of the most powerful pictures of salvation in all of Scripture is not about a disciple, not about a prophet, not about a king, but about a murderer? A man who deserved to die. A man who woke up that morning fully expecting to be crucified before sunset. And yet, he walked out free. His name was Barabbas, and almost no one ever asks, what happened to him after that? The Bible doesn't tell us explicitly, but what it does tell us, what it shows us hidden in the details of that day, will shake something deep inside you. Because Barabbas is not just a historical figure. Barabbas is a mirror, and when you look into it clearly, you will see yourself staring back. Stay with this until the end, because what you are about to understand may be the clearest picture of grace you have ever encountered. The man in the cell. Jerusalem was alive with tension. The Passover crowd had filled every street. Thousands upon thousands of pilgrims had come to remember the night God passed over Egypt and set his people free. The air smelled of roasting lamb and burning incense. But beneath the celebration, something dark was moving. The religious leaders had been plotting for days. They had finally arrested Jesus, the man from Galilee who healed the blind, raised the dead, and claimed to be the Son of God. And now he was standing before Pontius Pilate. Meanwhile, in a Roman cell somewhere beneath the city, a man sat in chains. His name, in Aramaic, was Barabbas, which means Son of the Father. That detail is not an accident. Matthew chapter 27 verse 16 calls him a notorious prisoner. Mark 15 verse 7 is even more specific, and there was one named Barabbas, who was chained with his fellow rebels. They had committed murder in the rebellion. He was not a petty criminal. He was violent. He had taken a life. Under Roman law, the sentence was clear and final: crucifixion. There was a cross already prepared for him. Think about that: a wooden beam, nails, a hill called Golgotha, his name written somewhere in the Roman records next to a date and a method of execution. Everything was ready. The machinery of death had been set into motion, and Barabbas was at the center of it. He knew this. He understood what the morning would bring. And then, everything changed. Rome's concession to Jewish custom, to release one prisoner during the Passover feast. A gesture of goodwill, a political calculation to keep the restless crowd satisfied. John chapter 18 verse 39 records Pilate saying, "But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" Pilate had a plan. He believed, perhaps naively, that the crowd would choose Jesus. After all, Jesus was beloved by thousands. He had fed multitudes, healed the sick, and just days earlier had been welcomed into Jerusalem with palm branches and shouts of Hosanna. Pilate thought this was his exit from a situation he didn't want to be in. He had already told the chief priests, "I find no fault in him at all." John chapter 18 verse 38. His own wife had warned him, "Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him." Matthew chapter 27 verse 19. Every signal said, "Let Jesus go." But Pilate underestimated the rage of the religious establishment. The chief priests and elders had been working the crowd, moving through the people, whispering, persuading, turning the tide. Matthew chapter 27 verse 20 says it plainly. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. So when Pilate lifted his voice over the crowd and asked, "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" the answer came back like thunder: Barabbas. The moment of exchange. Inside the cell, Barabbas heard the noise. We don't know exactly when the soldiers came to his door. We don't know if there was warning or if it was sudden. But at some point, the chains came off. The door opened, and a Roman guard told him something that must have felt impossible. "You are free, not because you are innocent, not because someone proved you didn't do it, not because the law changed, but because someone else, someone who had done nothing wrong, was being sent to the cross in your place." Matthew chapter 27 verse 26 records the moment with devastating simplicity. Then he released Barabbas to them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. The innocent man, beaten, delivered to death, so the guilty man could walk. This is where most sermons stop. But the question that almost no one asks is the one that should haunt us. What did Barabbas do with that freedom, the silence of Scripture and what it reveals? The Bible does not tell us what happened to Barabbas after he walked out of that cell. And that silence is significant, because Scripture's silence here is not an oversight. It is an invitation to sit in the weight of that moment and ask the question that God has always been asking every human soul. Now that you are free, what will you do? Some early Christian traditions, including accounts in the Gospel of the Hebrews, a text known to early church fathers but not included in the canon, suggest that Barabbas followed the crowds to Golgotha. That he stood at a distance and watched the man who had taken his place die on the cross that was meant for him. We cannot verify this with certainty, but it is a haunting possibility. Imagine it, you are Barabbas, you have just been told you are free, your execution has been cancelled, and you hear the crowd moving toward Golgotha. Curiosity pulls at you, or maybe something deeper than curiosity, something that feels like a debt you cannot name. So you follow, and you arrive at the hill just in time to watch them nail Jesus to the cross. The cross that was built for you, the nails that were meant for your hands, the crowd mocking, the soldiers gambling for his clothes, the sky beginning to darken. And you understand, at a level no theologian could teach you, what it means for one man to die in the place of another. The truth almost never taught. Here's what the church rarely slows down to say: Barabbas is the only human being in history who could look at the cross of Jesus Christ and say with absolute literal truth, that should have been me. Not metaphorically, not theologically, literally, the cross was prepared for him, the execution order had his name on it, and Jesus stepped into his place in the most physical, concrete, historical sense possible. But here is the truth that should steal your breath: we are all Barabbas. Romans chapter 3 verse 23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans chapter 6 verse 23, for the wages of sin is death. Every human being who has ever lived has stood in that cell. Guilty, deserving the sentence, the cross prepared, the execution inevitable, and then, the exchange. Isaiah chapter 53 verse 5-6, but he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities, the chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, we have turned, every one, to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. The Lord laid it on him, all of it. On the same morning Barabbas walked out of his cell, God was completing the most staggering transaction in the history of the universe. The sinless Son of God was absorbing the guilt, the punishment, the death sentence, not just of Barabbas, but of every man, woman, and child who would ever believe. And the Passover crowd didn't even know they were reenacting it. They thought they were choosing between two criminals. They were actually illustrating the very heart of the gospel. The guilty go free because the innocent takes their place. The name that carries a secret. Go back to the name. Barabbas, son of the Father. In Hebrew and Aramaic culture, names carried meaning. They were declarations, destinies, identities. And this man, this murderer, this rebel, this prisoner, carried in his very name a profound irony. Jesus, the true Son of the Father, died, so that Barabbas, a man whose name claimed a father he did not deserve, could live. Some early church scholars, including Origen, noted that in some ancient manuscripts of Matthew chapter 27 verse 16-17, Barabbas is referred to with a full name, Jesus Barabbas. If that variant is accurate, and many textual scholars believe it is, then Pilate stood before the crowd and asked, "Which Jesus do you want? Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus called Christ?" The crowd chose the wrong Jesus. They chose the violent one, the guilty one, the one whose freedom cost another man everything. And yet, even this was not outside God's sovereign plan. Acts 2 verse 23 would later record Peter declaring, "Him, being delivered by the determined purpose and foreknowledge of God, you have taken by lawless hands, have crucified, and put to death." It was determined, it was foreknown. The exchange of Barabbas for Jesus was not a political accident. It was a theological declaration written in the flesh and blood of human history. The weight of freedom. But now we return to Barabbas, and to us. Because the question the scripture leaves unanswered is the same question that stands over every soul who understands the gospel. What do you do when you discover that someone innocent died in your place? There are only two possible responses to genuine grace. The first is indifference. You take the gift, walk away, and live as though it never happened. You return to the same violence, the same rebellion, the same patterns that put you in the cell to begin with. You use your freedom to serve yourself. The second is transformation. The weight of what was done for you becomes so real, so unbearable, so beautiful, that you cannot live the same way anymore. You don't earn your freedom. You don't deserve it, but you carry it differently now. You carry it with awe. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 15 says, "And he died for all, that those who live should live no longer for themselves, but for him who died for them and rose again." He died, and he rose. This is what Barabbas, and the watching world, did not yet know. What looked like the end of that Friday morning was not the end. 3 days later, the tomb would be empty. The death that had swallowed Jesus would be swallowed by something stronger. Romans chapter 4 verse 25. Who was delivered up because of our offenses, and was raised because of our justification. The resurrection is not just a miracle. It is the proof that the exchange was accepted, that the debt was paid, that the sentence against Barabbas, against us, has been fully cancelled. Colossians chapter 2 verse 14 says he wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, which was contrary to us. And he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. The execution order, nailed to the cross, gone. What the story demands from us. We do not know if Barabbas ever believed. We do not know if he ever knelt before the name of the one who died in his place. Scripture leaves that question open, perhaps deliberately, so that every reader must answer it for themselves. But we know this. He had more reason to believe than almost anyone who has ever lived. He had seen, with physical eyes, the substitution that the rest of us see only by faith. He had felt the chains come off not because he earned it, but because grace arrived with a name, and that name went to the cross for him. And yet knowing the truth is not the same as surrendering to it. The Pharisees who orchestrated the crucifixion knew the scriptures better than almost anyone alive. They could quote Isaiah chapter 53 from memory, but knowledge became a shield they used to protect themselves from the very Messiah the scriptures described. The question is not whether you know the story of Barabbas. The question is whether you have let it land. Have you sat in that cell? Have you felt the reality of your own guilt, not the guilt that culture defines, but the deep moral weight of a soul that has turned away from its creator? Have you felt the sentence hanging over you? And have you heard the door open? John chapter 3 verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Whoever, that word is enormous. It holds Barabbas inside it. It holds you inside it.